Welcome to today's lesson. Today we are going to look at equations. Before we do any maths with equations, we first need to know what we mean by an equation, so we're going to fill in our Freyer diagram. The definition of an equation is an algebraic form with one unknown that has equal sides. Once we cover the examples, this should make a bit more sense. The characteristics of an equation is that it always has an equal sign, and we can use any letter to represent the unknown, but there is only one unknown in the equation. If we look at some examples of equations, we have 5a take away 2 equals 1. This is an equation because we have one variable, so one unknown, the letter a, and there is an equal sign. 2y plus 7 equals y plus 4 is another example of an equation. We have two variables, this y and this y, but because they are the same letter, there is only one unknown value in this question, the letter y. So because we have one unknown and an equal sign, this is still an equation. Our next example is x squared plus 5x plus 7 equals 25x minus 2. Again, there are multiple variables, but all of them are the same letter, x, so there is one unknown, and again we have an equal sign, so this is an equation. And the final example, 3x plus 2 all over 7 equals 4x. Again, only one type of letter appears, and there's an equal sign, so we have an equation. On to the non-examples for an equation. X plus y equals 7 is not an equation because we have two different unknowns, x and y. Another non-example is 5x squared plus 2. Because there is no equal sign, this is not an equation, it is just an expression. On to today's examples. Today we're going to look at manipulating equations, which means we're just going to do some maths with the equations rather than solving the equations. So if we have a look at our first question, we need to add 2 to both sides of the equation. This means I need to add 2 to the terms on the left hand side of the equation, and I need to add 2 to the term on the right hand side of the equation. When we're adding 2, we need to look for the term on each side of the equation that I'm allowed to add 2 to. What this means is 4x and 2 are not like terms, so I'm not going to write add 2 underneath 4x. I can do 3 add 2 quite easily, so I'm going to write an add 2 underneath the add 3. This is showing that I'm adding 2 to the left side of the equation. Now I need to add 2 to the right hand side of the equation. 22 is the only term on the right hand side, so I can write add 2 underneath. I'm now going to draw a line underneath those two lines, and I'm now using column addition. 4x, add nothing because there's nothing written underneath the 4x, is just 4x. So I'm going to keep 4x written underneath. Positive 3, add 2 is positive 5, so that's going to be written alongside here. The equal sign needs to drop down to this line because I'm going to be left with an equation, and an equation must have an equal sign in it. And 22 add 2 is 24. So adding 2 to both sides of the equation gives us 4x plus 5 equals 24. On to the next question. We have the same equation of 4x plus 3 equals 22, but now we need to multiply both sides of the equation by 2. Multiplying works slightly differently to adding. That's because in algebra we don't need to have like terms in order to multiply. We can just multiply parts of algebra together anyway. So for this, because I can multiply 4x by 2, I'm going to write a times by 2 underneath it. Because I can multiply add 3 by 2, I'm going to write a multiply by 2 underneath that. And because I can multiply 22 by 2, I'm going to write a times 2 underneath that. For multiplying, it's really important that we multiply every single term by the number that we're multiplying by. Again, I'm going to draw a line underneath this, and here we're using column multiplication. I need to do 4x times 2 and write that underneath here, positive 3 times 2, write that underneath here, and 22 times 2 and write that underneath here, making sure to drop the equal sign down. 4x times 2 is 8x. Positive 3 times 2 is positive 6. 22 times 2 is 44. And again, the equal sign needs to drop down. So multiplying 4x plus 3 equals 22, all by 2, gives us 8x plus 6 equals 44. On to question 3, and we need to add 2 to both sides of this equation. Again, because we are adding, we are looking for like terms that I'm allowed to add 2 to. So on the left hand side, we're going to add 2 to positive 5. So I'm writing a positive 2 underneath positive 5. On the right hand side of the equation, I'm allowed to collect a minus 9 with an add 2. So we write the add 2 underneath minus 9. Again, we draw a line underneath these two lines, and we add them together. 8x add nothing is 8x. Positive 5 add 2 is add 7. We'll drop the equal sign down. 2x add nothing is 2x. And then minus 9 add 2. Again, if we're unsure at this point, we can use a counter method, but we need to make sure we deal with our negative calculations correctly. Minus 9 add 2 is minus 7. So our final answer for this question is 8x add 7 equals 2x minus 7. On to the next question. where we need to add 3x to both sides of this equation. Here, because I'm adding 3x, I need to write it underneath the like terms of 3x on either side of the equation. So, because 8x and 3x are like terms, because they both have the same variable with the same power, I'm going to write add 3x underneath 8x. There'll be nothing underneath add 5 here. Underneath 2x, I'm also going to write add 3x. So I have added 3x to both sides of the equation. And then there'll be nothing underneath the minus 9. We will add those two lines together. 8x add 3x is 11x. Add 5, add nothing, stays as add 5. We drop the equal sign down. 2x add 3x is 5x. And minus 9 add nothing will stay as minus 9. So the final answer for this question is 11x add 5 equals 5x take away 9. This next question is very similar, but now we're subtracting 4x from both sides of the equation. Subtracting works in the same way as adding. We need to look for like terms. So 5x is a like term with 4x, so underneath 5x I'm going to write minus 4x. That's done for the left-hand side of the equation, so onto the right-hand side, and I'm looking for a like term with 4x, and that will be this minus x term here. So underneath minus x, I'm writing minus 4x. 5x take away 4x, well 5 take away 4 is 1, so 5x take away 4x leaves us with just x. Minus 8, and we're not doing anything with minus 8, so it will stay as minus 8. The equal sign will drop down. Nothing is happening to 6, so 6 will drop down. And then we have minus x take away 4x. So we're doing minus 1 lot of x, minus 4 lots of x. So minus 1 take away 4 is minus 5, and that will be minus 5 lots of x. So the final answer for this question is x take away 8 equals 6 take away 5x. The final question for today is multiplying both sides of this equation by 3. Just like we did with the last multiplying question, we have to multiply every single term in the equation by 3. So I'm going to write times 3 underneath the 5x, a times 3 underneath the minus 8, a times 3 underneath the 6, and a times 3 underneath the minus x. Multiplying those together, 5x times 3 is 15x, minus 8 times 3 is minus 24. The equal sign will drop down. 6 times 3 is 18. And minus x times 3 is minus 3x. So the final answer for this question is 15x minus 24 equals 18 minus 3x. And that concludes today's lesson on equations.